This episode of the Dead Man Walking podcast is brought to you by Castmagic. Castmagic is the premier AI tool for repurposing your audio and video content, generating dozens of potential new engagement opportunities between you and your audience. Each week, Castmagic saves me 4 to 5 hours post-production time. Check out what Castmagic can do for you by clicking the link at the top of the description box. Now, on to another great conversation on the Dead Man Walking podcast. Welcome to the Dead Man Walking podcast. I am your host, repeatedly dead Fred, author of the medical trauma memoir, The Summer I Died 20 Times, which is what happened to me. And that's how I got the nickname. Makes sense, right? Today, I am doing part of my author series with Mimi Wahlfeldt, and she is just north of Colorado in a very secretive place that we can't talk about. And she's here to talk about her new book, Orcs and Knives, which is coming out in August, I believe. And we have the same publisher, Black Rose Writing, and that's how we connected. So Mimi, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. And you said north of Colorado, north of Denver.
North of Denver, yes. Yeah. Sorry.
It's okay.
I get us. I've got a contact high from everything that's going on in Denver.
Right. Unfortunately, that's what we're known for now. There's more to Colorado than pot.
So, Mimi, you're originally from the East Coast.
Correct.
How did you end up in Colorado?
I came to Colorado in 1987 to go to graduate school at the University of Colorado in Boulder. And I went there for a master's degree program, and I was told halfway through that they were discontinuing the master's program, and I had to stay for a PhD. And I said, thank you very much, but that's not really what my plans were. So I only stayed for the year, and I met my husband, the one that I sort of loosely based this book on, during that same year. And so instead of going back home to New York, I stayed in Colorado and made a life here, and went back to graduate school many years later, but not to CSU.
Okay.
Or CU, I should say.
In your blurb that you sent me, you said this is sort of like a fictional autobiography, which I've never really heard of. I suspect they're out there. So it's a new segment of writing, I guess. Or new to me anyway.
I've created something.
Yeah. So this isn't a book that really came out or came together in like 2 or 3 years. This is like, the overnight success, 25 years in the making.
Exactly. Good way to describe it. Yeah, I guess, memoir doesn't fit, and it's not fiction. So the way I describe it, it's fiction inspired by the reality of the life that I lived during that period of time. And so it's not a linear telling of that couple of years of my life. It's a fictionalized version. And the name Forks and Knives comes from the idea that, and we'll talk about, I assume, what the book's about, but the forks in your lives, the forks in your life where you wonder the what ifs, what would have happened if I'd done this, or what would have happened if he'd said that, those kinds of things. And so I just kind of explored all of that. The truth of what happened in our marriage is peppered throughout all of the different forks, but it's not a linear telling. So that's the overall.
I can relate to that because my memoir, because I had a lot of head trauma, memories were wiped out. And as I was writing, some things would come back, and I wasn't even sure if they were real memories. And I'd have to get them confirmed with other people and back and forth. And so, 2018, I remember something from 2013 or 2010. So I totally appreciate what you have put together. So you went on a blind date, and
wasn't quite that. What is your question specifically?
Take us back to the beginning. So you got married, and there was something you didn't know about your husband.
Exactly. We got married. We were living what I thought was a happy, wonderful life. We were trying to get pregnant. Then we did get pregnant, and it took a little while. We were married 4 years before my daughter was born. And but during that time, when I was pregnant, he revealed the true nature of his drinking problem. It's something that I had kind of suspected a little bit, and every time I confronted him about it, no, the denial was very thick on his part and then mine. So unbeknownst to me, I kind of was living this lie. And then I was 2 months pregnant when he finally told the truth. And it was, life changing. I had to really decide, am I going to stay in this or not? And what does that look like? And everything I thought we were living didn't feel real anymore. I didn't know if I could trust him. And here I was starting to have a family with him. So it was a very scary time. And so the book starts there. It starts when we were in a substance abuse wing of our local hospital, and he's confessing to the nature of his secretiveness and the depths of his drinking problem. And I kind of felt really blindsided, but trapped because I was pregnant, and all those vows start going in your head. But for in sickness and in health, for better, for worse. And can I really leave him right now? And so anyway, I didn't actually leave him, but in the book, the first fork of the story is that I do. Or I shouldn't say now I've fictionalized it. So the character's name is Kat and the husband's name is Eric. And I'm trying to really kind of think of them as separate people. And they really are separate people now that I've, written the book. But so it just kind of explores those different chapters and how this character navigates all of those different what ifs along the way, at different forks in the road.
So I'm guessing, you being from the East Coast, you didn't have the familial support cast that a lot of people would have had.
Very true.
How did that work its way through?
Great question. And I am an only child. And so my parents were back in New York and I was in Colorado, and that was really aiding, making me feel much more alone probably than I was. I had friends, but no family. I don't have siblings. And so that was very difficult. And that's exactly what happens to Kat, is she goes home to mommy and daddy in that moment. So she goes back to New York. And I thought about it a lot in that real time. So I'm very close to my parents. Well, I was very close to them. I lost them both in the last couple of years. But I was very close to them. Thank you. And so, yeah, it was a very big transition for me, and it was a hurdle for Kat in her story.
Yeah, totally tangential. I had a friend who was an only child, and he got engaged and married a woman who was an only child. But the kicker is, all four parents were also only children.
That's
they had
really
absolutely
unusual.
No relatives.
Wow. That's very unusual. Yeah, I don't usually hear that at all. And I did have a sister. She died when we were very young, both of us. So only might be a stretch, but still, I grew up as an only child after I was 6. So
Yeah. So where did the writing bug come from?
my parents were both wonderfully talented writers, not perfect. Well, my mother actually was a theater critic for many years in her retirement, later in her life. And and both of my parents just had this wonderful gift. They were self-educated. Neither one of them completed college. They just were avid readers, very much interested in theater, and just self-taught, and loved literature, loved writing. So I just kind of grew up around that. And I like to tell people, I have it on my website, that they were the English Nazis growing up, you know what I mean? So my friends would say the wrong thing, who and whom, and me and I, and my parents would correct them, and I'd sit there so embarrassed. And yet I would learn, I would learn the difference, the proper way to say things. And so when I started, I don't know, high school maybe, I started thinking about writing, and I always journaled. I never really wrote creative, anything fiction at that point, but I was always a good writer. Fast forward, I always knew I'd like to try writing a novel, but I didn't have time. I was raising kids and working and all that stuff. In May of 21, I was not so gently nudged out of my job, and sort of embraced an early retirement, and went, all right, maybe this is the time I'm supposed to write, because I was only 56. So I thought, all right, maybe I'll have a second career doing this. And I sat down to write, and I said to myself, well, I wrote this thing a long time ago. I wonder if it's any good. And what that thing was is the journal. It was a long, long journal entry of all of the stuff that was percolating about my first marriage. And it was really just meant for myself. I never intended to read it to anybody, share it with anybody. And but when I was starting to write, I'm sure you're going to ask me about this later, but I'm jumping ahead. My husband, my current husband, my happily married husband, is a
Mhm.
retired English teacher and journalist. And so I said, would you read this and tell me if it's good enough to work on? I know it's not a novel right now. It's a long cathartic, therapy session on the computer. Should I try to make it a novel? Would it be interesting to anybody? And he got halfway through it and he went, yeah, you should work on this. It needs work, but yes, you should work on it. And I did. So that's how the book came about. But you're right. It's 20 years ago that I
Mhm.
wrote the thing that now is the book. So it's been a long time.
Do you have any of your older journals? Have you ever looked back into them, if you have them,
No, about the marriage, you mean throughout my life?
throughout your life?
Yes, I have looked at those. And, mostly it's teenage angst. It's like it's unrequited love. And I used to write songs back in those days. So that was probably the creative outlet for my writing, was writing songs. And they were
Mhm.
all that kind of love stuff. And, but interestingly, when my marriage started going badly, I thought, wow, there's really good fodder for some good ballads there. And I couldn't write music. It just wasn't coming out. So I think
Yeah,
I was in just survival mode at that point. So
that would make sense.
yeah, in
So
retrospect.
I'm thinking you're writing, and you've got this great helper with your husband who's got
Mhm.
all this writing experience. Was there any particular lesson that he shared with you that helped you get through the process?
Well, interestingly, the best thing he suggested to me was joining a writer's group.
Mhm.
Um, when he was younger, he had joined a writers group, and it's the same writers group. It was still around. It's called
Mhm.
Pen Pointers. It's a Northern Colorado writing group, and it's been around for decades. And Stephen, my husband, was involved with it before I met him, probably close to 30 years ago now. But he was a single parent at the same time that I was a single parent. Then we met, did a mini
Mhm.
Brady Bunch thing. But when he was a single parent, he was trying to write some fiction, and he just couldn't manage it with working full time and taking care of his kids, who were older than mine at the time. Um, but he always said that the writing group really, really helped, because
Mhm.
not only are you sharing all your writing, but the support and experience and things like that. So what I came to learn after I joined that group, they welcomed me, which was wonderful, is that I was a good writer, but I wasn't sure I was a good storyteller. And I didn't know there was a
Mm.
difference. I read a lot, and I know when I read a good book and I know when I read a bad book, but I didn't understand the makings of a good book. How do you do that? How do you develop character and character arcs and storylines and plot lines and cliffhangers and all those kinds of things? So I've learned a ton in the last, it's been 2.5 years now with this
Mhm.
group. And they really helped me with that part of it, as much as some writing. I'm not saying I knew everything about writing either. So it's been a really an intense growing period, and
Mhm.
I'm so happy that Stephen, encouraged me to do that. It's been very helpful.
Yeah, I found my writing groups very, very helpful as well.
Mhm.
And now that I'm much busier and not participating in them as much, I feel a little guilty,
Mm,
that I'm not able to help all these people who who help me or who are looking for help. But
right, right.
it's a good opportunity for growth.
It is. Yeah, definitely.
And that Reagan Roti guy, uh,
Hmm.
he was also he's I think his feedback to me was, "This is really good, but you need a hook."
Oh,
And I'm like,
yeah.
"What's a hook?" You know?
Right, exactly. I didn't even know what that was at the beginning. So yeah, just so much to learn. Yeah.
Mhm. And he was very helpful. So how did you come to Reagan?
So one of the gentlemen in my writers group, Brian Kaufman, is a published author, and he's published with Black Rose, but then also with other places as well. He's a fascinating guy, this Brian. He's written in so many different genres that
Mhm.
sometimes, he started out writing horror, and then
Mhm.
he also has written historical fiction, and he's written a baseball book, and I mean, just a lot of different things. So when he found Black Rose, he told me about it. I tried to find an agent and tried to go that way. And
Hmm.
at the end of, 3 months of trying that, I went, all right, I'm going to finally reach out to Black Rose, and heard back from them almost immediately and accepted my book. And it's just been really wonderful. I found out in August that it would be released this coming August. So I'm in the process of finalizing the cover with David King,
Hmm.
and doing the final galley layout, proofing and stuff like that. So I believe it's going into full production pretty soon. So
Yeah.
excited to get my first hard copy in hand at some point soon.
Who are you bragging the most to?
Who am I bragging the most to?
Yeah.
I, I'm not really a good bragger, which is part of the difficulty I'm having promoting the book. But I
Hmm.
don't know, my inner circle of friends, the people that I've worked with and who have always said, "Oh, Mimi, you're such a good writer." Well, okay, that's one thing when I'm doing a newsletter for my organization or writing a press release,
Hmm.
and that's been the bulk of my professional writing. But now that there's a book, they're all like, "Oh, I can't wait to read it," and things like that. So it's going to be a real jump for them to see the difference in that kind of writing. It's been a jump for me to see the difference in that
Hmm.
writing. So in my inner circle, I'm actually really proud to share it with my kids. I was really proud to share it with my kids. They're 28 and 30 now.
Hmm.
And the story obviously involves their history. So they're uniquely positioned to experience it. Nobody else will experience it like they. And they were very positive. They knew I was writing it, and they were very positive. And once I got it done, they were a great audience too. So they're good cheerleaders.
Yeah, I sometimes joke around that I'm the most famous writer in the household.
There you go.
The only writer, but
Well, I can't say that because my husband's also writing a book. He's writing his first
mhm,
novel finally, now that we're both retired. So we're both
mhm.
doing it. Yeah.
Can you leak what he's writing about?
Yeah, sure. I can tease to that. And he hasn't let me read it yet, which is just not fair. He's writing a crime drama. We have a lovely cabin about an hour from here up in the mountains in Colorado, and it's our little escape, and we go there often. So he has set the murder in our little town. He's fictionalized it, and he's loosely
Hmm.
based the lead investigator, the deputy sheriff, based on himself. Of course, that's what writers do, right? So it's intriguing. It's a murder mystery, and it's all in that little town near us. So that's fun.
I hope the tourism board doesn't get hold of this. They may say nobody's going to want to come here.
The little town up there, it's called the actual town is called Red Feather. He's fictionalized it, but they do a really good job of supporting local authors.
Hmm.
Interestingly, there are many. I don't know if they were writers before they moved there, or if they retired and decided to move there and become writers like we've focused on later in our life. So I don't know, but they're very supportive of that, which is exciting when we get our books out there to put it in the little
Hmm.
grocery store and things like that. It's a small town.
Hmm.
So
Good. So, do you think you have a book number two inside you?
I have already written book number two, actually. I
Oh.
am in the editing phase of that. Yep. So Stephen has already read it and critiqued it, and I'm working on the revisions for that.
Hmm.
For Forks and Knives, I did hire an independent professional editor. I'm not
Hmm.
100% sure I'm going to go that route this time. Maybe she's kind of trying to retire, and I guess that's what's making me hesitate. Um, but Stephen does a great job, and then my writing group does another layer of helping. So we'll see. But I am done with that. I'm working on revisions. So yeah, I didn't know I'd have another book in me, but it kind of just started coming, and I rode that wave. So
What inspired the second book?
I have no idea. It's total fiction. It's total fiction. I don't even remember coming up with the idea of it, quite honestly. The
Hmm.
character just kind of came to me, and I just started writing. I definitely was pantsing it. I've learned about plotting and pantsing, and for this book, I've definitely been a pantser. So I'm just flying by the seat of my pants, if to define that for your listeners. Yeah.
Okay. I'm working on a sequel for my memoir, and I'm also
Uh-huh.
working on a crime fiction about a serial
Okay.
killer. And this serial killer book came to me while I was watching a YouTube video.
Okay.
because I could not believe what I was seeing.
Okay.
And I thought, this guy for sure is a serial killer. And it just sent
I,
me down this rabbit hole. And you
I
know,
love hearing where people get their inspiration from. It's real. Well, I can tell you that I have a third book in mind. I haven't started
mhm.
it yet, but that was there was an actual experience that I had that stirred that thought. So I think it's cool. I love listening to that with in my writers group. You know where they came up with the ideas and stuff for their books. So it's
Mhm.
everywhere. Inspiration is everywhere, right? And truth
Yeah.
is stranger than fiction.
Yes. In one of my writing groups, there's a number of people doing historical fiction, which I had
Mhm.
also never heard of until I joined the group.
I hadn't either.
And wow, you just take a story that everybody knows and then
Yeah,
obliterate it.
that's right. Yep. Make a fictional storyline around it. Yep.
Okay. So you mentioned you have a website up.
Hmm.
So we should probably share your contact info with the audience.
Wonderful. Sure. It's authormimi.com. And my name
That's
is
MI.
Mimi.
Yeah,
Yep.
not
Mimi.
MEME.
Yeah. No. And it's funny though. And you might have to start typing in my last name, which is Wahlfeldt, if you just do WAH, because there is another female author named Mimi who that's not her website, believe it or not. That's not her website. But because mine was so new when I came up with it, every time I type that in, hers would come up.
That's funny.
So yeah, it is interesting. That must be an SEO thing. But my website is actually authormimi.com and hers is not. So kind of strange. But anyway, so my last name starts with a W. That's me.
Okay. And are you going to be available to do like book readings and things of that nature?
I hope so. My career before this was in marketing, and I really don't feel comfortable with social media. So my
Hmm.
favorite thing is face-to-face stuff. I like event planning, and I like, trade shows and all those kind of opportunities to meet people and build that kind of personal connection. So I am looking right now for the place that I'll have the book launch on the day that the book is actually available for purchase, August 22nd. But after that, I am looking for, coffee shops and other bookstores and things like that where I can do either readings or signings, whatever that looks like. So I am very excited about that. And the Northern Colorado area seems to be very welcoming of local authors. I know
Hmm.
that may not be true everywhere around the country or Canada. I'm not familiar with Canada's market at all.
Hmm.
But I am hopeful that I'll be able to find some venues where I can meet people and promote the book. The other thing is that because it is, I won't call it a self help book, it's really not that, but it is educational in terms of learning about addiction, learning about codependency. I'm hoping that there's an avenue there where I can find people who are experiencing those struggles. And I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but I think there's some avenues I can look at to reach people there.
For sure. If I could give you one piece of advice, not that you've
Please,
asked for it,
please.
come up with an author signature.
Huh.
Like if you've got 20 people in line and you're
Yeah,
writing out your regular signature, it's like hand
I
cramps.
bet. Well, what's funny is because Wahlfeldt has so many consonants. I was joking with you before that we need to buy a
Mhm.
vowel. I've already kind of scrunched that to an M and a W and a funny T. So,
Mhm.
maybe that'll do for me. I don't know. We'll see.
But
Or just Mimi.
is that like a Dutch name?
It's German.
German?
My husband's
Yeah.
family. Yeah, it's German.
I was in the neighborhood.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Okay. So is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience about the book or yourself or things you're plotting?
um the book itself, like I said, I do feel I am hopeful that it will help people. It's about a young couple who are struggling with addiction and codependency and recovery, and they succeed sometimes and sometimes they don't, and it's a up and down battle. It doesn't, very rarely does somebody say, oh, I'm going to be sober now, and then that works. So and a lot of focus tends to be on the person who has the addiction, and there is less attention or support really for the people who love that person, who live with that person. And
Hmm.
that's kind of what I wanted to shine a light on. is that it's really hard to love an addict, to try to build a life with somebody who's lying to you, and those kinds of things. And then you have to come to the point of, is it worth it anymore? And when you have small children, it makes it harder. And I guess part of what Kat talks about in her book is the dream. Most people, I think, even still today, get married with the idea of happily ever after until death
Mhm.
do we part. And even though divorce is an easy option these days, I don't think most people sign up for marriage and think, oh, well, I'll just throw it away if it doesn't work. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of heartbreak. There's a lot of, the death of the dream, and it doesn't happen quickly. So I, and again, I do hope that the book and my website also has a resource page that talks about resources for both addicts and those who love them, legitimate organizations throughout the country that are available to help people through those challenging times. So, and I guess in a broader scope, the idea of forks and the forks and knives, the knives part comes because some of the forks are very painful, and so they cut, they hurt. So I think that everybody has forks in their lives. It doesn't have to be about addiction. Everybody has choices. We make choices every day. And if you've ever stopped to wonder, what would have happened if I dated that guy instead of that guy, or majored in this instead of that, or didn't go to the grocery store that day, instead went to buy some shoes. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Any of those changes, big and small, can affect the course of your life. And I think it's kind of fun to look at that. And it's just eye-opening to look at your own life that way. So I did it on this big scale, but everyday small choices can also lead in those directions too.
I like that you illustrated that a lot of attention isn't focused on the people being affected by the addict. And I
Yeah.
had on Carrie Haim, or Hyam, who's the older sister of Corey Haim, who's the
Oh, yes.
child star. And,
Yes.
unfortunately, he had an addiction problem. And one of the things we talked about is like when the adversity hits you and it's not even your adversity,
Hmm.
which is
That's a great
what you and
phrase.
your kids experienced.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what else to say about it, but yeah, it's hard. And having support to navigate it. I found support through the 12-step programs, and counseling, but there's many ways that people can get support. I think the biggest thing that's changed from now compared to 25, 30 years ago when I was living that is that, the subjects aren't so taboo anymore. And,
Mhm.
when I talk about this book now, every single time, I'm not exaggerating, Fred, every single time somebody says to me, oh, yeah, my mom drank too much, or my brother was an addict, or my son is struggling. Everybody knows somebody, or they
Mhm.
are struggling themselves, but everybody knows somebody. Addiction in any kind of realm, no matter what they're addicted to, affects, almost every family in the country. I don't know about the world. Um, so I think it's great that people are talking about these things now instead of
Definitely.
suffering alone. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you're doing a really cool thing. So,
Well, thank you.
and I hope lots of people buy your book.
Well, thank you
And
so much.
unfortunately, we're running out of time.
I
So
understand. Well, it's been a pleasure to chat with you, and I appreciate the format. And yeah, so I look forward to talking to you afterwards about what happens next. And yeah, so thank you for the work that you do, and I'm excited to read your book. That's actually on my to read list. So
thank you. And thank you to all of you who have tuned in to the Dead Man Walking podcast. Please like, subscribe, check out Mimi's website, buy her book when it comes out in August, and do the likes and shares and all the things that the influencers tell you to do. And have yourself a great week. We'll see you next episode. Bye bye.
thank you.